Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today on Thursday, September 19th, to start officially another week of the NFL regular season. We have Week 3 kicking off tonight between the New England Patriots and the New York Jets. We're going to preview that game in the first segment, but we're also going to be looking at some other storylines around the NFL, why the scoring is down through the first 2 weeks of 2024. Pretty interesting there based on all the facts that were provided, and we're also going to be predicting some of the other results heading into Sunday later on, plus some more topics down the line as well, so make sure to stick to the show to find out what those are. But before we preview tonight's game, I'd like to remind you guys about a new feature we have on these live shows. If you haven't been tuning into the show, and if you got any questions during the show or want to hear anything that you have to say, making any comments or sharing any opinions, we want to hear about it, right? Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights, whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or an opinion, like I said before, that you have to share. Don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on any of the live shows, there's an easy way to go about that, just by using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. And also, you can also use the alternative option, the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, to still tip and donate and leave any comment or question there as well. We appreciate you guys for your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you guys of part of our community. Anytime you guys are able to interact with us and use that new Super Chat feature down in the chat box. But now, with that out of the way, we could start previewing tonight's game, right? A pretty interesting one because it's the first AFC matchup that we have in this new year, other than the fact that, right, the Dolphins and the Bills played. This is the first AFC East matchup between the Patriots and the Jets, both of theirs, obviously their first divisional games, and we're going to be looking at some injury news because there's some pretty big ones on each side, as well as just looking over their performances, the key factors and matchups that are going to play a part in tonight's game, plus also just giving my predictions before kickoff tonight at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Both teams are coming into this game 1-1. The first divisional game, like I said, for both of these teams. The first time also that Aaron Rodgers is playing back at MetLife since the night that he tore his Achilles last year. So there's a bit of, a flashback moment, I guess you could say. Obviously, you hope he stays healthy, right? That goes without saying. But I'm sure that's going to be pretty emotional, I guess you could say, for him, right? Being in that stadium and now actually going through a full game. Hopefully, it all goes well for the Jets. But starting on the New York Jets and getting to them first, there were some injury concerns with their two defensive backs, Michael Carter and DJ Reed. They were both dealing with a knee injury, that was DJ Reed, and an ankle injury for Michael Carter. Those were the two injuries for them, but they weren't given an energy designation, They weren't given an energy designation in the injury report, so they're good to go. They should be good because of no injury designation on any of those guys. But also, C.J. Mosley, through last week's game against the Titans, he is listed as questionable for tonight's game. Last time I checked, with a toe injury, and on a short week, he was still questionable, obviously, to play. I haven't seen any updates or anything like that on his availability tonight. I haven't checked since this morning, or I haven't gotten anything as of yet. But looking at it for right now, C.J. Mosley obviously going to be a big miss if he's unable to play. He didn't participate in practice yesterday also. So we'll see as we get closer to game time what his status is. Jermaine Johnson also is the bigger one than C.J. Mosley, their pass rusher. He is out for the entire season after last week suffering a torn Achilles, and having no Hassan Reddick also still in the building. He's probably not going to play tonight, obviously, still holding out. That leaves a big hole for the pass rush for the Jets, right? Because Jermaine Johnson was expected to take a bigger step now. Will McDonald's looking good, but he's also in his second year. So not having Johnson, not having Hassan Reddick, I'll be interested to see how that pass rush looks tonight, and how major it is with how the Jets perform in this game. But it goes without saying that they had a good result last week, right, against the Titans to win on the road and show some growth, I think, from week one, because week one didn't go at all how it was supposed to, right, in their eyes. Losing to the 49ers, the offense kind of died out. The defense, really just non-existent. So to go into Tennessee, show a bit more on the offensive side of the ball, with Brees, getting him involved a bit more, scoring another touchdown. That was big, but still, it's a work in progress, though. They're nowhere near finished. Aaron Rodgers looked a little bit better, but hopefully in this game it all culminates, right, with their first game at home just a few hours. So that is that on the New York Jets. On the Patriots side of things, their big injury worry would be their center, David Andrews. He is being listed as questionable with a hip injury. And also, just like C.J. Mosley, there is no update on him this morning. I saw that he was questionable, and just checking right now, he is still listed as questionable. No updates on the starting center for the New England Patriots. The Patriots just had a tough loss at home against the Seattle Seahawks, where they didn't play too bad on offense. They just gave up big performances to DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Both of those guys had great games, and they just managed to edge it out 23-20 over the New England Patriots in week 2. But it's not like a performance that I was disappointed in them or any way, shape, or form. Against the Bengals, they played over their expectations, and now with what I saw in week 1, I was pretty satisfied with what I saw from them in week 2. Their defense is better than what they produced in week 2. I feel like they could play better, and limit the other team's stars a bit more, with Christian Gonzalez playing great, Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers and all those guys. I think they have more capabilities in them, so I'm hoping to see them kind of rebound tonight and try to shut down Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, and Breece Hall as well. But, stopping Breece Hall, like I mentioned, is going to be the biggest part of that. But we're going to get to that in a few moments. The eye for me to keep an eye on in tonight's game will be the running backs for New England, because last week it was a decent performance by Ramondre Stevenson and also Antonio Gibson. But they also, in the game against the Titans, if you look at the Jets and their running backs, and their running back situation, kind of defending the run, Tony Pollard, had a decent game against them, but New England is going to be better with Stevenson, with Antonio Gibson, right? They're a lot more prominent in the run game. So with how Tony Pollard performed and now having an increase there at the running back position, it is something I'm looking forward to see how the Jets try to stop this running attack as opposed to Tennessee's last week, because I think the Patriots, that's their identity, right? That's what they want to do, and they're going to be relentless with it. It's not like it's a first quarter or just first half sort of thing. They're going to go run the ball probably the majority of the game based on how everything plays out. So that'll be something I'll be watching out for. But in terms of the matchups that I'm interested in seeing, the first one being Christian Gonzalez against Garrett Wilson. In the past, Christian Gonzalez has played better, or in their one matchup, I guess I should say, I don't think he allowed that many catches. He played pretty well. I don't have the stats in front of me, but the last time they did match up, Garrett Wilson struggled a little bit more. Obviously, he didn't have Aaron Rodgers, but Gonzalez, last time they did play, had a good day against Garrett Wilson, so I'll be interested to see how much Aaron Rodgers goes to him and how much the Patriots sort of leave him one-on-one with Gonzalez because they trust him, or they double him right away to force Aaron to go somewhere else. That's one matchup, right? Then we have, like I mentioned before, with David Andrews, if he plays or not. that matchup between David Andrews, the center, or the replacement center, and also Quinnen Williams. Going up against Quinnen Williams, how and who is going to win that matchup will be huge because of the run game, because of the pressure on Jacoby Brissett. That's all going to be huge for this game. Quinnen, the most prominent, defensive lineman they still have left that's actually participating for them. How much can he affect the game as well? And lastly, a name that you guys might not know if you don't watch the Patriots too much is Keion White, their defensive end. He has 4 sacks on the year already, going up against that Jets offensive line that allowed a couple sacks to Harold Landry last week. So how successful will Keion White be trying to get to Aaron Rodgers? That'll be a big matchup in determining this game as well. And just some of the factors, some of the developing things that will happen in tonight's game. Can Quinnen Williams, off of the point I just made, can he dominate and contribute to stopping the run, and how successful will he be in that regard? Also, the New York Jets, they have to generate some sort of pass rush also, alluding back to the first point I made, right? With Jermaine Johnson being out, no Hassan Reddick. How much pass rush can they get to Jacoby Brissett, and how uncomfortable can they make him in this game? Because, their pass catchers aren't necessarily household names. So if Jacoby, is just sitting back there with all the time in the world, those guys could look like, Pro Bowl type guys if the quarterback just has a bunch of time to throw it to them. So that'll be huge, as well as still, likewise for the Jets, who else is going to step up outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall to kind of help out this offense and help out Aaron Rodgers? That'll all be things I'm looking at in tonight's game. But in terms of my predictions, I think there will be some struggle from the New York Jets because of how good the New England defense is. But still, I feel like I'm going to have some confidence in Breece Hall and Mike Williams potentially tonight to play a little bit more and show up for the New York Jets. It's their home debut. You have a lot of anticipation with Rodgers and, your first home game, obviously. I feel like they're going to be playing at a different level. We're going to see the biggest jump that we have seen from them in tonight's game as well. So I'm going to take the Jets in this one by a close margin. There are definitely going to be some moments, but I think Aaron and the Jets offense will come through in the end and deliver and go to 2-1 after tonight's game. That's what I think. We'll see how it all plays out. I am anticipating a relatively low-scoring game, but the Jets will win this one. Let me know what you guys think on top of that as well in the live chat if you agree with me, or maybe you're thinking it's an upset tonight. Maybe the Patriots steal yet another game that they're not necessarily expected to win. So we'll leave that segment there, anticipating the start of that game in about an hour and a half or so. But now we can move on to the next segment, a narrative going around the NFL through the first 2 weeks. The scoring from everybody league-wide has been down compared to other years. Why that is, why there's not this exciting brand of football, down the field throws as much, and how we can address that, and is it necessarily a bad thing? I'll answer all those questions when we return after our first break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into this interesting narrative reporting, sort of facts-based story that I came across that has, I think, a few people talking in the NFL so far on this topic so far, right? If you look at it, the scoring in the NFL, right? Through all the changes we've seen to produce more points in the NFL, right, to grow it a bit more on the offensive side and have these back and forth battles that, culminate everybody. The changes to sort of promote that, you look at the changes to the rules to sort of protect quarterbacks, the hits that are now allowed compared to like 20, 15 years ago, obviously. The hip drop tackles is another one. And I feel like it's stingier, like the play calls, the penalty calls, I should have said, are a bit stingier for the defenses than they are for the offense. And again, all in an effort to try and promote the offense, right? I don't think that's any secret, but through all of that, the data still shows that the offense and the scoring has been down drastically this year, and it's caught a lot of people by surprise, including myself, because if you look at the stats now that I will read out to you guys, you look at the teams so far this year in the NFL, they're averaging 21.4 points per game, and you look at a few years ago, in 2020, the average points per game that year in the NFL was 24.8, so we've seen a decrease there. Also, you look at the yards per game so far this year, it's averaging around to 318 yards per game this year, and in 2020 again, the average that year was about 359, another decrease. And we're going to bring up, and we're going to talk a lot in this segment about cover 2. And again, if you're very unfamiliar to that, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, cover 2 or 2 high is basically just this defensive formation, this look on defense, right? For the defense, whichever team is defending on that drive. It's basically this look, right? If you're looking over at a screenshot of the field, it's just basically when you have 2 high safeties behind everybody else on the defense, just standing pretty far from the line of scrimmage, just covering essentially one half of the field, right? If you split it down the middle long ways, that's their sort of assignments, right? They're the 2 high safeties, the cover 2, right, on that play. So that's what I mean by when you hear me say cover 2 or 2 high. It does play a lot to do in this topic, and I'll explain why, but some of the stats around offenses going against cover 2 this year compared to 2020 are as followed that I thought were pretty interesting. You look at the average depth of throw against cover 2 in 2020. The average depth of throw was 7.8 yards in 2020, and now looking at it this year, now the average depth of those throws are about 6.6 yards, so not that big of a decrease, but still a decrease nonetheless. Then also, now offenses are throwing the ball 1.9 yards short of the first down marker versus cover 2. That was back in 2020. They threw it about 2 yards shy of the first down markers against that defensive coverage, and now it's up to 3.2, decreasing how far they're willing to throw, right, in 2024. And the one that's most surprising is that in 2020, 11.6% of passes traveled at least 20 yards in the air in 2020, and now in this year, it's dropped to only 9% of the passes that travel at least 20 yards against cover 2. And why am I talking about that so much? What does that have to do in this scenario, in this discussion about scoring? Well, ESPN's Mel Kiper had a great discussion this morning that I was watching on the idea of cover 2 and just how defenses are sort of overdoing it on the defensive side of the ball with cover 2, right? Mentioning how the 2 safeties are too far back, right? Because usually you don't want to give up anything behind you, right? You want to stay pretty relatively far back, but his whole point was that they are too far back, right? It almost looks like there's 9 guys out there rather than the full 11. So he suggested that there should be a rule to kind of force them closer, to kind of bring back some of the deep passes, encourage some more throws down the field, attacking those defenses rather than just having 2 safeties kind of sit back there, right? That was his whole point, right? But I kind of see how it's not necessarily great for the NFL to see a drop in scoring, because that's what they've been trying to sort of promote, increase, and at least the more exciting games draws more people in, right? Obviously, that's what the NFL wants in trying to expand the game. But I don't necessarily agree with the fact that it's like an awful thing, like it's the last thing we want to see happen. And here's why, right? Well, first I'm going to explain why there's been a change, in my opinion, right? Why I feel like the scoring and why the defenses, instead of maybe looking worse or looking more, I guess, vulnerable with how the NFL has been trying to push offenses, why they're sort of, bunkering down now and holding strong, at least at the start of this year, is because I feel like the quarterbacks, right, the star of the show, have changed as much as any position as we go through the years, and especially how they're brought up through college, right? Because we no longer have the older style of quarterbacks like still Aaron Rodgers, Big Ben, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, these guys, right? These middle to low athletic quarterbacks, but just masters of reading defenses, cerebral, and learning the game like that, right? That's all to do with them. And now you look at the transition into the new group of quarterbacks. Now you have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, right? That's the peak of the top tier quarterbacks now. And you see how different it is to, Peyton, Tom, and Big Ben and all those guys, right? That's a big change already. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because those guys are the peak. It doesn't really necessarily encapsulate everything. Like the majority of quarterbacks now, I think, compared to before, are a lot more reliant on their athleticism, a lot more reliant on quick reads, short throws, and having it work out a lot more for them in college. And then once they get into the NFL, you see a lot more struggling, and, they're labeled busts, or they're labeled like they're not able to read a defense. And yeah, that could be true, but it's not like they can't learn. And I think that's where some of the problem lies. And I have a comment here, shots below the belt. Modern NFL offenses have devalued the running back position. Having a great running game opens up the passing game immensely. And quarterbacks today are blitzed more because of a lack of the running game. I was going to mention the running game also. So just hold that thought here for a second, because I do agree with you. The devaluing of running backs is certainly a fact of the matter now in the NFL, but it could be making a comeback soon, and I'll explain why in just a few moments, right? But to just go through, the progression of all of this, right? It goes back to college, I think, because a lot of these quarterbacks, everything obviously in college is slower, not as many tough throws through pockets of zone defenses, right, that you have to do in college. The first read is usually the one that's open. A lot of times for these big programs, they have good coordinators, so that first read is usually open, making it easier for the quarterbacks to go through their progressions. If they go to their first one and it's open, it looks efficient, but they're not necessarily going through the entire picture, right, if that makes sense. Not many, also now with NIL and transferring and all that stuff, not a lot spend more than a year, if at best two, at one school, develop and kind of earn their spot. A lot just go through programs, and once they get a starting spot, they play well, and then they move on to the NFL, right? All of that doesn't necessarily help them once they make the move up to the NFL, right? Because now defenses are well equipped to combat the tendencies that these young quarterbacks have and that they're coming in with as well, right? I go back to those first read sort of things, and now defenses are a lot smarter. They're very deceptive, right? They show you one look, and then once the ball is snapped and they switch to something completely different, you might go to your first read that worked against the, let's say, cover 3 that they're in, or cover 4, and then they change it to cover 2. Now the quarterback is looking at them like lost in a sense, right? They try to look at anywhere else. They might hold the ball too long, and then that's when you get this narrative build up around these quarterbacks, right? That they take bad sacks, they take unnecessary sacks, and it is true, but also it has to do with the fact that they just haven't done it that much in college, right? They're not used to reading defenses, right? And the biggest point also with this is that why this leads to the lowering of points now in the NFL, right, is because big plays that way now go away. It leads to longer drives for these young rookie quarterbacks and really any quarterbacks, right, in the NFL. Now I think we're starting to see longer drives, and they're obviously harder to do, right? If you're having to string 8, 9, 10 play drives, it's hard to do that consistency throughout an entire game rather than in college where you see like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State hitting these big plays at least like 5 times against whoever college they play, not the level of defenses obviously you see in the NFL, and it goes quicker, right? They rack up the points and then, they go sit on the bench and that's it. In the NFL now, I think what we're seeing is defenses, right now you bring in that cover 2 that I mentioned before, they're willing to give you all the short throws and make these young quarterbacks go through longer drives because they know that's something they haven't really done in college. So now doing it at this level, they might do it for a drive, maybe even 2, but once they get later in the game, defenses sort of understand what they're trying to do, then it kind of dies off, right? They're not able to sustain these long drives unless you have the running aspect of it now, and that's why I mentioned the running game sort of coming back, right? Because you look at the most successful teams in this low-scoring year, right? You look at the teams that are most successful right now through these first 2 weeks. You got the Saints, the Vikings, the 49ers also to an extent, and the Green Bay Packers, right? This Shanahan, McVay sort of offense that usually establishes the entire offense, like you said, through the running game, right? If they're playing cover 2 so much, and like Mel Kiper said, they're way far back preventing any sort of deep throw, that means there's less people in the box, right? And that's where you see games where the Saints are running all over the Cowboys, right? Where they don't have the personnel. They might be playing with like 5 or 6 defensive backs in their defense, so the Saints take advantage of it. And then once they do that, once they start running the ball and you need to get more people in the box, then you fake it to Camaro, you roll out, and everybody's over pursuing, and that's where you get the big throws down the field. And that's where I think my biggest issue with, I guess, Mel Kiper saying that cover 2 needs to be, altered in a way, is the fact that I just feel like not enough teams now are countering what defenses are doing, right? You always hear take what the defense gives you. I think too many teams are doing that now rather than saying, all right, this is what they're going to give us. Well, they're going to be weak in this other area, right? Let's try to manipulate it. Let's try to counter that with doing this other play or this other motion, and let's have the defense react to us, right? Rather than the offense just giving in to whatever the defense shows them. And that way, it's more of a chess match, right? I think it's a lot more interesting that way. And that's my biggest point in sharing this segment, is that I think now it's just more sophisticated, and I think now it requires more of a command, more of a strategy, more of a game plan that guys like Clint Kubiak are showing you with the Saints, or Kevin O'Connell, obviously Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur. All these guys are very meticulous in their game plan and what they do, and that's why they're labeled like geniuses, right? Where there's more anticipation, there's more, I'm going to sacrifice this, but I'm going to gain it somewhere else, right? And that way it's more of a duel in a sense, right? And I think it makes it a lot better. It brings the running backs more back into the NFL. And cover 2 is not impossible to beat, right? That's the root of all of this, right? I just think now not enough quarterbacks are making those tough throws, and not enough offenses in the NFL are able to counter what they see from the defensive side of the ball, because their quarterbacks are just not able to do it once they come out of college, right? It takes some time. And I guess that's also why you see Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, also these experienced quarterbacks now having more success, right? Because they're groomed to doing this, right? They've been taught how to do it a little bit more. And that's basically where it all kind of stems from, in my opinion, right? I feel like that's the biggest thing. Tom Brady sort of alluded to it before at, I think it was Fanatics Fest, when he said the lack of command from quarterbacks now is a lot less, and I think that supports a lot of it, right? Not a lot of quarterbacks now have the ability to counter what they see on defense, right, and try to adjust to it. Maybe they see a coverage and they say, this play's not going to work, so I'm going to counter it and audible to this other play. I think that's what's missing now with this new wave of quarterbacks, and Again, I don't think this is a bad thing. Scoring obviously draws more people in, but if you're really watching it and really, I guess, appreciate defense like I sort of do, it makes it a bit more interesting, I think. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that's just my opinion, right? How the scoring is down. I feel like it's going to increase now also. So we'll see how that all goes. I mean, the Saints and the Vikings and these other teams aren't really complaining. So I guess it hurts some teams, and it's just going to force more teams to change, right? And that's the beauty of football, right? When it changes to one thing, then it eventually switches back to the other thing. So that is that topic on cover 2 and the scoring being down, right? Not necessarily being a bad thing for me, but with talking about scoring and defenses and all of that, we can get into some of the games from this upcoming weekend, predicting some of the results in these upcoming games, only half of them, and I'm going to finish the rest of them tomorrow in tomorrow's show. But for now, we're going to go through 7 games and give you guys my predictions on the winners of those matchups. So stick around. We'll be right back after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping right back into the action now with our next segment, looking ahead to the games on Sunday. We're going to give some of our predictions for the upcoming games this week. There's 13 games on Sunday rather than last week there being 14 because there's actually 2 games on Monday Night Football. So we're going to leave it until Monday to predict those games. But for right now, unfortunately, I don't have a graphic. It wasn't working before for me. So apologies for that. I'll try to have it up tomorrow. But through having some of these first 7 games of the Sunday slate, we're just going to go through them, give you guys my picks, and explain why I feel strongly about these picks. I haven't looked back through these either. I don't know how successful I've been, apart from the big games, right? I know I predicted the Cowboys to win. That went awfully bad. I did predict the Chiefs to win. The Lions when they faced the Rams. I definitely didn't predict the Cardinals to beat the Rams last week. So I feel like I'm about like 500 right now, hopefully, if I go back and look back at those predictions I made. But for right now, hopefully we get these right in week 3, starting off with the Chargers at the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? 2-0 teams still through the first 2 weeks. Both teams that are almost mirror images of each other, right? Both teams that just love to run the ball. Old school game, I think we could anticipate in this one, with both having great running back duos, right? Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Funny enough, 2 former Ravens with a former Ravens offensive coordinator in Greg Roman going up against the Steelers, right? Someone that's very familiar with them in Patrick Queen and how he tries to stop that offense will be fascinating to watch. And also just with these 2 running back duos, right? Jalen Warren and Najee, and Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, right? How well do they do on their own, right? Running the ball, but also how well does the offense, grow from that, and how well do their passing games, evolve from the running games, right? Who can connect the dots better, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. That'll be interesting to look at. And also, I think you can really look at who is considered a pretender or who's considered a contender in this game as well, with both of them being 2-0. And depending on how the margin of outcome, sort of plays itself out, that'll be another indicator of which team is sort of for real this season, I believe. And For right now, looking at both of them, I feel like Pittsburgh has played a better team, at least up until now. Their defense has seen a better offense, I think, than what Los Angeles has seen, right? And that's obviously not their fault, playing the Panthers and the Raiders. But the Steelers have, I think, been exposed to a good defense in the Atlanta Falcons and also a dangerous offense in the Falcons as well, with Bijan, Drake, and Kyle Pitts. They did pretty well against them, so I feel like the Steelers defense has sort of an advantage there when it comes to facing the Chargers in that regard, right? Because this is the best team the Chargers have played up until now, so how they respond will be fascinating. And based on that, I feel like the Steelers will come away with the win here. I feel it's just that experience, right, of seeing a high-level offense, high-level defense as well with the Falcons and, playing pretty well off of that, whereas the Chargers haven't seen a defense to the level of the Steelers or an offense not necessarily there either, right? For as bad, I guess, as the Steelers offense has been, it's not the Panthers offense, and I think I would consider it better than the Raiders offense, right? So I think that will make the difference in this one. Also, Fields and the offense, I think, is as good as any offense they've seen so far, like I mentioned. So I think it'll be close. A risk or a potential to be low scoring, probably a big potential, but regardless of that, I think the Steelers will come out on top. First home game as well for the Steelers. I think they'll go 2-3-0. Then in this next matchup, the Packers travel to Tennessee to take on the Titans in their next game. The Titans still without a win this year. They are 0-2, and the Packers are now 1-1 after they beat the Colts last week. Maybe Jordan Love has the potential to play in this game. He practiced yesterday at a limited capacity, and there is optimism around him, which is remarkable because he suffered an MCL sprain and looked pretty bad on the field, but he's only missed last week, right? And if he comes back this week, it'll be tremendous, obviously, to have your quarterback back, but I'm not anticipating it, or if I was their coach, I probably wouldn't have him out there. That's just me. I don't want to risk injuring him again or having to risk him not being able to protect himself in any way. So I wouldn't play him, and I would play him next week against the Vikings, if I'm correct there. But that's just me. There's that potential there. But the quarterbacks in this game will be interesting, right? Because it could be potentially Will Levis playing against his former team, and how well do they do now with Will Levis, with a game under his belt now as well. But Will Levis also is a good quarterback, I will say. He's had two of the worst moments, I think, in the first 2 weeks, with the just throwaway that didn't go too far and just chucking it up the field to the Bears defender, causing that pick six, and also, again, similarly, just throwing it behind himself while he's horizontally in the air, and you got that reaction from Brian Callahan, and obviously it's a bad decision. That's unacceptable to have, but other than that, he's looked okay when he's trying to make these throws down the field, trying to operate within the offense, right? When he doesn't get so frantic and panicked, I think he makes decent decisions. So their defense is playing very well as well, and last week when the Packers ran it like 50-something times on the Colts defense, I think they won't be able to do it that much now, obviously, because Tennessee's defense is very good, in my opinion. Their defensive line is very good as well. They're not going to allow Josh Jacobs to run for like 150 yards, right? So with that being the case, I feel like Malik Willis is going to have to throw it a little bit more, and with that comes my prediction. I feel like Tennessee needs this game badly at home. I feel like Will Levis will respond, and I believe they're gonna win this game in a close one. I think it's going to be close regardless, but Will Levis will play better, and the Tennessee Titans will have enough to beat the Packers. And then the next game is a big one. The Houston Texans playing at the Minnesota Vikings. Two great weeks so far for both of these teams. The injury status of Justin Jefferson will be big. How concerning is that if he's able to go in that game? It's looking like he'll be available, but you never know. Another great team visiting Minnesota after last week. The San Francisco 49ers came in, but the Vikings won that game. And this is definitely the best team Houston has played so far. They almost lost in week 1 on the road to the Indianapolis Colts, and I would guarantee that the Vikings are better than the Colts at this stage of the season. So this is going to be a great matchup for both of them. I think the Texans defense is going to be certainly challenged with the play calling of Kevin O'Connell, and likewise the Minnesota offense is going to be challenged by this defense as well, because they are super talented everywhere, and the offense as well. This is right up there with the best offense they've played. Probably better than the 49ers one, right? Because they were without Christian McCaffrey. So great test for both of them. Potentially no Joe Mixon in this game either. That's another injury to keep an eye on. But with saying that, I saw Indianapolis put up some points on the Houston Texans defense at home. So I think Minnesota can make a statement win here, and I'm taking them to win and defeat the Houston Texans because I'm feeling like Joe Mixon won't play in this game. I just have an anticipation on that. So without Joe Mixon, I feel like that'll be a big loss to kind of overcome there for them. And I like Sam Darnold. I'm convinced on Sam Darnold already. I don't want to throw any quarterback's name out there, but you know what I'm saying, right? Kevin O'Connell, I think, is the mastermind behind all of this. I think they'll make some good stops on defense. Give me the Vikings in that matchup. Then moving on to the next game, Philadelphia and New Orleans. I kind of gave my pick already on this one. A massive game for different reasons for both of these teams, right? The Saints trying to make a statement by beating a contender, and also the Eagles trying to quiet down the noise from all the criticism right after the game against the Falcons by beating the Saints, the red-hot Saints and their offense in New Orleans. Big game for both of those reasons, but I already picked the Eagles. I feel like they're going to run the heck out of the ball now with no A.J. Brown, and the Saints just haven't seen an offensive line like theirs, so I'll take the Eagles in a must-win game for them. Then the Broncos travel to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. Very different teams here, right? The Broncos with a rookie quarterback caused the Bucs to go 3 and out a couple times, but I feel like the Bucs are too overwhelming on offense to not score like 20-something points on them. This Bucs offense is not the Steelers offense. They're going to put up some points. Baker Mayfield's playing great. I'll take the Bucs in this game to go to 3-0. Then the last couple games here, the Giants travel to Cleveland. Obviously taking the Browns. The Giants just scored 3 touchdowns against the Commanders and didn't allow a touchdown, and they still lost. Like, you get those moments in certain aspects of life or in games where you just know it's not your day. And when you lose to the Vikings like you do, and then you put up 3 touchdowns, your defense doesn't allow a touchdown, and you still lose, that's an indication, right? Like, this season's not going to go great. It's going to be a long season, and I don't think traveling to Cleveland against that defense, for as troubling as their offense sort of looks, give me the Cleveland Browns, obviously. And then the last one I will talk about is the Bears and the Indianapolis Colts, 2 of the youngest starting quarterbacks in this matchup and in the league, coming off of a tough offensive performance from both quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson against the Packers didn't look great. The Caleb Williams against the Texans also didn't look great. Indianapolis is still looking for their first win. They're 0-2. Chicago's 1-1. And their offensive line for the Bears is obviously the biggest issue, whereas the Colts' biggest issue is the running game, or the defending the running game, So it's funny how those two things connect, because my biggest thing for the Bears is trying to run the ball more to protect Caleb Williams from taking those hits, and trying to establish it more with a running game. You don't have Caleb dropping back 30, 40 times a game and just risking him getting hurt on those plays because they can't hold up for more than half a second. So trying to incorporate the running game a bit more, even though it hasn't been great for the Bears, I think they'll try to do it now. There's no DeForest Buckner or Ebukam for the Indianapolis Colts, right? They're 2 best pass rushers and obviously run defenders, so they're not going to be there. I think it's too easy not to run the ball a lot in this game. I'll take the Chicago Bears. I like Caleb Williams finally having sort of a breakout game and winning this contest. Unfortunately, the Colts will go to 0-3. Chicago will move to 2-1. those are my picks for the first half of the slate. Like I said before, I'll finish the second half tomorrow, hopefully with some graphics for you guys. But for right now, we'll be able to move on to our next segment. I mentioned some of the quarterbacks in my predictions in this segment: Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and I'm going to throw back in here Derek Carr as well. What's our level of confidence around those three guys? Are they top 10 quarterbacks right now? Shall I say maybe even higher in the league so far based on how they played? Are we fully convinced by all three of these guys already? I'm going to answer that and give you guys my reasons why after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and on today's show, I wanted to continue talking about some of the quarterbacks I mentioned in the last segment, specifically Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, and Sam Darnold. If you looked at this group of quarterbacks and made this a whole segment about like 3 to 4 years ago, it would be so just unnecessary and just confusing as to why I'm talking about this group of quarterbacks. But all three of these guys command some of the best offenses we've seen already through the first 2 weeks of the NFL, right? Three of the biggest surprises thus far in 2024 has been the performance of the Saints on offense with Clint Kubiak, the Minnesota Vikings with Sam Darnold there, Tampa Bay in another year with Baker Mayfield looking somehow better than they did last year. They're all 2-0 right now, leading their division, sort of. The Bucs and the Saints play in the same division, so they're kind of sharing that title. But the Minnesota Vikings certainly in command of the NFC North right now. And the three quarterbacks have a huge contribution to this effort, right? This sort of campaign that we've seen so far from each of these teams. And, you know, looking at the stats and trying to make a case for these guys, right? Looking at how they've performed so far through this year. You look at some of the passing stats, some of the passing leaders so far through this year. I have a couple of them here that I wanted to share with you guys. Looking at passing touchdowns, we have Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield leading the NFL with 5 passing touchdowns each, and Sam Darnold is currently in second as well with 4. Also, Derek Carr leads the NFL in QBR at 96.2, but Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield make up the rest of the top 6. Sam Darnold at 71.5 and Baker Mayfield at 69.6. Top 6 in QBR, right, isn't bad for all three of these guys. Then also you look at quarterback rating, right? Derek Carr, again, leads all quarterbacks in quarterback rating with a high of 142.4. Baker Mayfield in second with a high of 129.1. Sam Darnold also in the top 5, 111.8. And to make matters, more convincing, I think, for these three guys, you look at the completion percentage so far for all three of these guys. Derek Carr is in second now, not first, with a 76.9% completion percentage. Baker Mayfield is in sixth with a 73.5% completion percentage, and Sam Darnold is ninth with a 72% completion percentage. Number 1 is actually Gardner Minshew with 77.5%, so that's pretty surprising also. But Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Darnold relatively in the top 10, top 3 in some of these stats, but also, you could look at the other side of this and make an argument that Sam Darnold hasn't played necessarily the best of the best competition yet, right? They played the 49ers, which is a good opponent to especially beat at home. That's an impressive win, but they also played the Giants, right? It kind of skews the difficulty of your opponents, right, so far. Same thing for Derek Carr, right? You demolished the Dallas Cowboys, but also you played the Carolina Panthers, right? Another skewed sort of difficulty level through the first 2 weeks. But Baker Mayfield, I think, has played the highest level of competition thus far in terms of average and in terms of the median level of difficulty, right? Because he's played the Commanders, who are better than the Giants and the Carolina Panthers, and also he's played a top team as well, beating the Detroit Lions in Detroit in that playoff rematch that they had just this past week. So that was an impressive win. He scored in that game and helped them massively to winning that game overall. And, those are pretty significant moments already, right? All quarterbacks have been tested thus far, right? With at least one tough game for each of them. And it's been impressive with these games so far. And you also look at other top quarterbacks right now that aren't necessarily playing lights out so far. You look at guys like Lamar. The Ravens are 0-2. He hasn't played awful, but I feel like he can definitely play better. Joe Burrow as well. The first week, not very good at all. Then week 2, you almost beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but it hasn't been steady, I guess you could say. Jalen Hurts as well. First week, a couple interceptions, and I feel like more people are talking about how they've been fortunate in those games, or especially in the Brazil game against the Packers, to not have lost that game. So that's another, inconsistent performance over the first 2 weeks. Matthew Stafford, it's not necessarily his fault, but, the injuries and the outlook going forward aren't too promising for him. Then Trevor Lawrence, another quarterback, hasn't looked great in both games this time against the Dolphins, not scoring in that second half, and also against the Browns, where he was just running all over the place, trying to survive out there. Not too impressive thus far either. Dak Prescott, another one in week 1. They looked all right. They did their job of beating the Browns. The Browns almost beat themselves in a way in some instances. But in week 2, the offense just wasn't there. It was a bit sluggish. It was a bit slow coming out to compete directly also with the Saints' red-hot offense. It didn't have a great look for Dak Prescott either. And if I'm going to try and name, top 10 quarterbacks right now and try to include these 3 guys, the guarantees that you have right now for me are Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud is definitely in there. Kyler, with how well he's played, I would include him in there right now. That's 4. Brock Purdy, I guess you could throw in there as well. I would throw Brock in there. It's been kind of inconsistent as well against the Vikings, but he hasn't played awful. Then you look at other guys like maybe Jared Goff potentially in there. But other than that, that's like 5 or 6 right there. And if you want to include Lamar in there or Joe, all right, that's like 7 around there, 7 or 8. I think from that point on, if you're really stretching it with those guys, Sam, Baker, and obviously Derek Carr are definitely up there. I think, in my opinion, I would definitely have all 3 of those guys as top 10s right now, based on the consistency that they've shown. It's not their fault. It's not like they picked that they wanted to play the Panthers or the Giants week 1. And in those situations, right, when a team is so much better than the other one, you expect to go out there and dominate. And that's exactly what the Saints did. That's exactly what the Vikings did against the Giants. So you handle your business and you destroy the opposition if you're that much better than them. And you move on, right? You move on, and now it is only 2 weeks, though. I do acknowledge that fact. But right now, I think through 2 weeks, if the season ended today for whatever reason, I would have these guys in my top 10 right now. They've been that impressive with not only their performances, but also their coordinators as well. And I'm going to give their praise in just a few seconds. But I think, even though I would have them in my top 10 right now, I think they're really going to make a case for it after this upcoming week, right? Because in week 3, we just finished talking about it again. Derek Carr is playing the Philadelphia Eagles. If they go out there and handle their business and say maybe beat the Philadelphia Eagles by a touchdown or more, maybe 2 or more. That's a statement win, right? It wasn't only a fluke against the Dallas Cowboys. They're able to go out here and compete with a contending team at home to handle your business. Another NFC direct rival. That's going to be huge for head-to-heads going forward. Another top quarterback and notable defensive players as well. If Derek Carr can go out there and win that game in convincing fashion, it's going to be even more of a case to solidify him as a top 10 quarterback right now. Then you look at Sam Darnold, right? Similarly for him against the Houston Texans, another top quarterback that he would have beaten if he wins. A top AFC team right now, potentially the best AFC team right now with injuries and all that stuff playing a factor. He's going to be at home again, so you expect the home team to win if you're playing this well, and a great defense that he's going up against also. So if he's able to go out there and defeat all of these factors, why wouldn't he be in the top 10 right now, right? 3-0, and if he performs well again, I think it's made a strong case for him as well. Baker, kind of not so much. He plays the Broncos, and so it's not the level of these other two games, but in week 4, he's going to play the Eagles as well, so that'll be a bigger statement. But right, you get the idea of what I'm trying to say, right? These next matchups, week 4 or this week in week 3, I think are going to solidify it even more, and I like these guys' chances, right? I actually picked the Eagles to win, but if Derek Carr wins, it's a big statement, right, in that regard. And I picked Sam Darnold to beat the Houston Texans, right? I'm feeling that confident about them because of their coordinators, right? Huge credit goes to them, and this also connects back to one of the first segments. The coordinators, like I mentioned before, with Kevin O'Connell, Clint Kubiak, and Liam Cohen, all three of those guys have been great thus far. They really excel at, I think, getting the best out of each quarterback that they have. They're not making excuses, right? Kevin O'Connell is not making an excuse that J.J. McCarthy got hurt. He's making the best out of Sam Darnold. Clint Kubiak as well. He's not making a big deal about the fact that the Saints were average last year. He's played great thus far. And Liam Cohen, again, coming into a new team, a new scenario, not making any excuses. He goes out, and Baker looks like he's just continuing his growth as well. So each coach and plan and scheme, they've all been great thus far. And based on these three games so far and other quarterbacks, I think we'll have a better idea after this upcoming week of who really can make up that top 10. But don't sleep on these guys yet, right? Don't rule them off just yet, because they are making a good case, and I'm convinced, but hopefully after this week they stake their claim a little bit more. But that is all I wanted to say on that segment. We do have one more coming up here on today's show, just addressing the exchange we saw at the end of the game between CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams, and also touching on the issues really with the Chicago Bears and their offensive line. We'll answer that and address that when we return after this break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, and I thought I'd address something that has picked up a bit of pace here since last Sunday night, right, when the Bears took on the Houston Texans, right? The Texans ended up winning that game 19-3 last Sunday night, and a lot was made of the advice that CJ Stroud gave Caleb Williams at the end of the game. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty much everywhere, right? You saw the exchange with CJ Stroud being mic'd up, and basically all he said was, just some words of encouragement. He paid Caleb Williams his respects, right? Saying that he respected him. Gave him some advice, right? That was the biggest thing. And about not taking those hits anymore. And at the end, he said he was rooting for him. So with how they both reacted and their body language and everything, the conversation that was had, I didn't think anything really was to make of this situation or this encounter, but also Caleb Williams looks frustrated, and that's something that people picked out too as well. But I think the same thought that some thought that CJ Stroud was also trying to kind of little bro him, right? If that makes sense, kind of like, taking him in and almost making himself look a bit better by just saying like, oh, like, keep it up, kid, like you'll get there eventually, right? Haha. Kind of like that, right? But I didn't really take it like that at all. From what I saw and what I heard in that conversation, also, people taking that statement and commenting that CJ is, acting like a 10-year veteran, right? He's only in his second year. That was something else that people brought up, and also other people didn't like how Caleb responded, right? Being a bit annoyed, having a facial expression like he wasn't trying to hear anything that CJ was trying to say, all of that sort of thing, right? But again, I didn't take too much stock into it, and also CJ Stroud addressed it yesterday in his media availability, and he said, it's not like I was trying to little bro him or nothing like that. He knows that. I have a ton of respect for him. I told him that. I respected him, and he continued on to say, I had so many guys coming to me after the games last year, and that meant the world to me that those guys even thought about giving me advice, so I just try to give back to what the game has given me. And he understood also, addressing the fact that Caleb did look a little bit annoyed, and he said he understood, right, because they lost. He's not supposed to be, giddy or happy-go-lucky, right? He just lost the game and he got killed, basically. It took, I don't know how many hits. It had to be over 10 or something like that. No one's going to be happy if you have that combination while the whole world is watching on Sunday. No one's going to be cheery or happy at the end of the game. So I think that's what I thought about it. Also, I think it's just a lot to make out of nothing, pretty much. If CJ wasn't to be mic'd up, nobody would have picked out Caleb's facial expression or would have picked out anything else, right? Caleb, should be mad after a loss, right? If you're really that type of player like we anticipate Caleb is going to be, and I believe he's going to be great, no one's satisfied with a loss, no matter if someone is trying to give you advice, someone's trying to dap you up after the game. You're not going to have a smile on your face, right? All you're thinking about is how you lost that game. And I think that's not a bad thing. And CJ also, I feel like he gets praised for already, just in his second year, right? It doesn't feel like that, but he gets praised for being that type of guy, that type of leader already, right? It's largely why CJ Stroud is so successful, I feel like, right? Because of his maturity, his humility, his character that a lot of people point out. They say that this guy is already, one of their leaders, one of the vocal guys, and already, he has this mindset that not a lot of second-year quarterbacks have, and that's why also his rookie year, his first year in the NFL, was arguably the best ever in the history of the NFL, right? I think a lot has to do with the type of guy that he is, and I think this is just him being that type of guy, encouraging other players, other quarterbacks, because he's been there, like he said. He's just trying to pay the respects back to other young quarterbacks like it was done to him. So I don't think it was a big deal at all that much. I thought it was just any sort of conversation like you see at every game, right? Every quarterback goes up to the other quarterback and just says whatever the fact it could be. So that was my thoughts on it. I just thought I'd bring it up. But I think, Caleb is going to be good, right? Transitioning now to this other point I wanted to make. Caleb is very good, and I think he's going to be very good, but he spent a lot of that time just running for his life on Sunday rather than throwing it. And I know they still had a chance to at least tie that game. If he hits that sort of back shoulder throw to DJ Moore, maybe they make something out of that drive. But it just culminated in the frustration DJ Moore showed, and I think Caleb also being frustrated, not hitting that throw, just being hit relentlessly in that game. It all, sort of showed at the end of the game. And the biggest reason why, I don't think it's any secret, it's that their offensive line has just been atrocious so far. I don't think they expected it to be this bad. I don't think anybody really did. If not, maybe they would have addressed it in the draft or tried to maybe make that a focus over getting wide receivers or anything like that. I don't know that, but again, this offensive line, I did not expect it to be this bad. The interior offensive line is bad. The tackles might be even worse than the interior, and, that's the entire line basically, right? They're all not playing to their best level, at least not to the level that you expect offensive lines to be playing in the NFL. And to me, they need at least a better running game so far to kind of balance it out right now, right? Because they're so one-dimensional right now, right? You can't be that when your offensive line is bad, right? When teams are one-dimensional, like maybe the Bengals or the Cowboys that we've talked about at times, right, on this show, they have decent O-lines, right? The Cowboys lost some pieces. The Bengals have an okay O-line, but it's not awful, right? Joe Burrow's not getting killed. Dak's not getting killed like Caleb Williams is right now. If you're going to have to go to a point in the game where you have to obviously throw, the defense knows you're going to have to throw, your offensive line can't be as strong as just like baby tissue or anything like that, and just walking through that offensive line, right? It gives you no hope, no chance at all in this scenario, right, with Caleb Williams. And they did so well this offseason, right, to address a lot of things. They've been labeled as the ideal situation for any rookie quarterback to come into, right, because they went out and brought back the guys on defense, right? They brought in and drafted Rome Odunze. They brought in Keenan Allen. They already had DJ Moore. They brought in DeAndre Swift, right? That's a great situation, right, from that standpoint. But they just missed out on the offensive line, or they didn't expect it to be this bad. And, it lessens the, having the fact that, you have all these other pieces there for Caleb Williams is great, but now that the offensive line is the last thing missing here, in my opinion, it's not like they could just go out and get an all-pro type of offensive lineman, right? Obviously, but maybe just trying new things out now, because being so one-dimensional and having no offensive line basically is the worst you could probably get, right? Caleb, you don't want him taking any more of these hits, right? He is your entire future, the entire cornerstone of this entire project that Ryan Poles and the Bears organization has been trying to put together. You can't ruin him or set him back because of the fact that you failed to protect him, right? You already got him the weapons, right? We're expecting them to come back and play more frequently, but something has to do about the offensive line, scheming it up, maybe running the ball more, like I said. Even if it doesn't get you any more yards, it's still, you want to make the defense at least acknowledge the fact that you're willing to run the ball, right? If they know you're not going to, that you've given up already, they're just going to tee off on you, and that's what the Texans did as well. So it's obviously easier said than done, but CJ is right in the advice that he gave to him, and I'll wrap it up with this, right? Saying that he can't be taking these hits because it leads to bad football and bad decisions, right? It leads to Caleb trying to run around for like 10 seconds, trying to find a target down the field. He just chucks it up and he throws interceptions, right? That's not good that's not good football, and that's not good habits to be building. That's not good development for Caleb Williams, right? And also, you have to focus on growing, and he has to focus on growing with this offense, commanding this offense as the game goes on. He shouldn't be having to worry or flinch or just be, I don't want to use the word scared, or just be aware that at any given time, he's about to take a blindside hit by somebody that he knows that the offense just can't block. So it all is related to each other, and that obviously is the biggest thing. You know, it goes back to CJ giving him that advice, and to me, it almost feels like they're going to just have to make do with this offensive line. But for me, to try and fix it any way I can, right? I'm not just going to sit here and let my quarterback get killed every game. You have to go to the running game. Even if you get like half a yard, 1 yard, or 2 yards each time you run it, you have to make it more balanced, because it'll help Caleb out a lot more by at least doing that, right? You can't just let him throw it every time, and defenses game plan for it, and it's not developing him at all. And the Bears can't screw this up, right? They just can't with Caleb. He is going to be good as long as they find him some protection or try to find any resolution to this problem, right? That's just what I'm thinking about it. CJ Stroud obviously knows it. That's why he gave him that advice. So we'll see how the Bears go on from this. They play the Indianapolis Colts this week, so hopefully we see a better performance from them and their quarterback. But that is all I wanted to talk about on today's show. Thank you guys for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Make sure to check out more of the GSMC Chip Shot Football podcast on both YouTube channels as well, where there's a lot more variety in how we provide the content around the NFL. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more stories and headlines around the NFL as well, with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me. Go watch the game tonight, and we'll be back tomorrow to talk and react to everything that happened between the Patriots and the New York Jets in tonight's game.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.